can. I'm just going to basically talk for just a couple of seconds because there's so many incredible women here that have so much to share with us. And I feel completely overwhelmed and so honoured to be here with all of you today. Yeah, I can't wait to hear what you have to say, and I know everybody else will be feeling the same. So thank you so much again for trusting us here at Treading Lightly to hold this space for all of you and to share your wisdom and your knowledge and your stories with all the people that are going to be tuning in, which is, yeah, we're already up to, I think, 63 now, so I'm sure they're still rolling in pretty quick. I just want to do a quick little bit of housekeeping and just to let everyone know that you will have a chance to ask questions. So please feel free to either use the chat or the Q&A button down the bottom of your screen to send through any questions, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. Because sure enough, any questions you have are probably what everybody else is wanting to hear as well. So please don't be afraid to ask questions. Also, to be respectful of these beautiful, beautiful, wise women and everything that they have to share with us, because we are very lucky to be receiving their knowledge. So it's always nice to be respectful of that. Also to let you know that if you want to watch the recording of this, if for some reason you have to leave and you can't watch it till the end, or your baby's crying in the background, as Lauren will know all about, we will have these recordings on our website. We've now been able to upload a webcast page onto our website, which is treadinglightly.org.au. So you can jump on there and watch all the recordings. So, and share them with as many people as you can. So, because we would love to get this knowledge out to everyone across the land and country. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Leanne. And again, thank you. And yeah, I can't wait to hear.
Oh, thanks, Monica. And thanks everyone for your support. I mean, every week it's just growing and it's so exciting to see so much support for cultural burning. Walawani Nindiwan, Ninya Yerbini Jamaga Bulwul Narangada, Ba Jamanya Jamaga Ganyita. Welcome all. Tonight we speak with strong women and we talk about good fire. Welcome, my name is Leanne, as Bon mentioned, and I'm one of the hosts of tonight's webinars. Bunjaga Daraga Baganda Maramarang Yungal. I remember that I stand on Maramarang Yuan country, and I'd like to extend that acknowledgement out to the traditional owners of where you're tuning in from tonight. We're all over the place again. I'm sure we didn't have time this morning to be able to see where everyone's tuning in from, but I'd like to pay my respects to my elders past and present and extend that acknowledgement where you guys are. So we have a lineup of strong women tonight and it's so exciting. So let's just get into it because we've got a lot to say. So straight over to you, Vanessa.
Leanne and Monica, thank you for that lovely introduction. If I could have my first slide up, please, Dean.
Bring that up.
Lovely. And while you're doing that, I'll just introduce myself. So Jingiwala, Nyanyeri, Vanessa Kavanagh, my Mirang, Bangam, Bunjalang, Dubai. Oops, I did lose my screen. And Waddaroo woman. I'm doing my PhD at the University of Wollongong, and I'm doing my PhD on Aboriginal women and cultural burning in New South Wales. So it's social science research, qualitative research, going and talking with Aboriginal women about cultural burning. So I'm based here in Wollongong, and I acknowledge my place as a visitor on saltwater Dharawal lands. So we know that prior to colonisation, Aboriginal women had strong roles in caring for country. You know, we were just as involved and engaged in caring for the landscape as Aboriginal men were. We were caring for our women's places and our landscapes and our women's sites, and caring for those Aboriginal sites and women's resources out in the landscape. So we know this through the cultural stories that are held strong in Aboriginal communities, the stories that are held by our women and our culture and our law. But we also know it by the stories that we can find in the diaries of colonial explorers. So if we just pop over to the next slide, please, Dean. Lovely. So this slide is an excerpt from the diary of colonial explorer Sir Thomas Mitchell. And it was 70 years after colonisation when Sir Thomas Mitchell was making observations of Aboriginal women burning country and caring for country using fire in and around New South Wales. And the quote on the screen here says, "Fire, grass, kangaroos and human inhabitants all seem dependent on each other for existence. The native applies that fire to the grass at certain seasons in order that a young green crop may subsequently spring up and so attract and enable him to kill or take the kangaroo. It's chiefly the females and the children who burn the grass." So that's some observations that were being made around, you know, that, well, in 1848, 70 years after colonisation. So we know from those records that Aboriginal women had those roles, but we also know it from the knowledge that's kept in Aboriginal communities today. So if we just pop over to the next slide, please, Dean. So in my social science research, I'm going and I'm talking with Aboriginal women in different communities around New South Wales, asking them, you know, what they hope to gain from cultural burning, the ways that they participate, also looking at some of the challenges and barriers that are preventing them from participating if they haven't been able to. And I can talk a little bit about the some of the preliminary outcomes of my research. So the women that I've talked to have said that cultural burning can promote for them access to country. This is country that has been either locked up in, you know, private property that they haven't been able to access in the past, or a country that's behind locked gates, and it might be public lands like national parks, but it's been, they've had restricted access to those lands. So cultural burning is a way that can facilitate people's actual physical ability to go out and be on country. Cultural burning can also promote the way, promote more engagement with Aboriginal people being able to walk on country, to be active and engaged in those landscapes, to be able to go and walk along and, you know, find new sites or check on old sites that they've known about. So maintaining those connections with Aboriginal places in the landscape. And that's really important because that's about maintaining, you know, cultural attachment, sense of identity, but also those values in the landscape as well. So cultural burning is able to do that. One of the most important things that Aboriginal women have talked about is the way that cultural burning can facilitate the process of intergenerational knowledge transfers. So we know that when we bring the mums along, that they'll bring their kids, and this is part of my story as well. I've been participating in cultural burning workshops and been able to bring my kids along. And so you know, that it's facilitating that intergenerational knowledge transfer, which is really important to have the kids involved. And I guess something a little bit wider, you know, when you're engaging with non-Indigenous agencies or departments, cultural burning is a way that can facilitate a bit of reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people through those engagements with the departments. And it's also a way that cultural burning can start to change the way that fire is perceived by those fire agencies like the RFS and CFA and the other departments around the country. So that's just a really quick overview of some of my research. And I just wanted to come back and end on this story, the picture on the slide at the moment. This is my daughter, Emma. She was 9 at the time, and she's lighting here her first cultural burn back on Wonnarua country. So, yeah, it was the first time in my family's history since the disruption of colonisation that we've been able to go back and maintain and uphold those cultural responsibilities of caring for country. And, you know, my mum had always said to me, whatever you do when you do your PhD, make sure you take your kids with you, because there's so much that they're going to learn from that process. And, you know, on this day, Emma was welcomed by local Wanneroo elders. She was, you know, around her old people and around those old spirits in country that are always there present with us. And I had talked to her about whether she wanted to light a fire, light the cultural burn. And she said, no, Mum, I don't want to do that. But when the opportunity was offered to her, she just marched right up there, and, you know, my heart just burst, you know, and she marched right up there and got right involved. And, you know, she was around other Aboriginal people like Den Barber on the screen there, and Lauren and Michelle, some of our speakers later, were there. And, you know, so much goodwill for the young Aboriginal people coming through, that the things that they'll be able to do in the future. And not only that, you can see in the background there's non-Indigenous people that were, you know, supporting and watching and hoping for the best for these young Aboriginal kids. So that's all I'm going to speak about now. I am going to hand over to Vicky, and I look forward to answering some of your questions. Thank you. Boogle Bear, everyone.
Thank you so much for that, Vanessa. So just to introduce myself, my name is Vicky Parsley, Wadu Ninyuan. Hello, everyone. I'm a Yuin South Coast woman. On my grandfather's side, his mother was actually Wiradjuri, so I acknowledge my Wiradjuri ancestry as well. My background, just quickly as an overview, I've worked for over 20 years in different government departments and quite closely with First Nations communities right around New South Wales. Back in 2018, I was proud to be included in the Bundanon cultural burning workshops that were conducted up at the back of Nowra. That was a really exciting opportunity. What I wanted to talk a little bit about just this evening actually touches on some of the stuff Vanessa's already mentioned. So I'll just go over a couple of things. One of the first things I just wanted to briefly, I suppose, mention is I had the pleasure earlier this year of being involved in participating in a women's field, which specifically was actually looking at how women identify and connect with nature. Due to COVID, the film hasn't been released at this time, so it's to be continued at a later time. But quite interestingly enough, there were some overall themes that were identified, which Vanessa so well put earlier in one of her slides there. But the two main ones I suppose I wanted just to bring up was about women were talking about that need and connection, and Vanessa mentioned about country. So the importance of getting out into landscape, that was a really strong ever-present theme that came about as a result of that. I was also interviewed during that time and spoke about just how significant that was with connection and identity. So in terms of identity, we had a look at, you know, our stories, our law, our oral histories, those kind of stories that came down. So I also talked about my experiences being on country are also sensory. This is something as well that comes about through that oral history process. So having knowledge of your landscape, I grew up with my grandparents on the South Coast who had very strong stories and connections down here. So they passed that on to myself and other members of my family. My mother's one of 10 children. I have biggest mob, lots of cousins. So I'm actually finding I'm going into that role now later in life where I've got some of my younger nieces and nephews reaching out and actually coming to find out a little bit more about that. So there is that transition of knowledge down through to the next generation, which is so important. I'm also a mother of two. I have two daughters, 13 and 10 years of age. And just as Vanessa mentioned, I've also had that experience of getting my kids out on country. There's some holistic well-being benefits with all of looking at those kind of the background as well, with strengthened identity, people and especially women and the young children reaping the benefits of being out, having that sensory exposure. Today we live a very modern society with a lot of technology. So even again, removing from, we talk about from a First Nations point of view that sometimes we have to walk two worlds, and it's living in that Western environment, but also being able to have that ongoing connection and going out. And that is something that is really important for myself and I'm now passing that down to my children. One of the other things too that I wanted to just briefly touch on tonight is I just find that this stuff is really exciting. The framework and the background that's gone into cultural burning now, and where we're actually reaching. The message is getting out there further, which is just fantastic. And I've actually been reflecting that my grandparents, they actually lived on the far south coast of New South Wales, lived and owned property for over 50 years. And it wasn't until the last few years that I started to reflect back and look at, well, my grandparents were burning and managing their property for that over 50-year period. And there are no known stories in our family down here on the south coast of them ever being evacuated, of there ever being any threats. The bushland, from my memories, my first teachings of learning bush tucker was walking that land with my grandparents, my older cousins, my aunties, my mother, my uncles, and being shown things. And I'm actually noticing now in such a short time frame, we've got really big differences to the landscape down here on the south coast, and even more so now since we've had the devastating bushfires. So capturing that knowledge, that setting, I think has even more importance now. And I can't reiterate enough now how much of an advocate I am with that transitional generational knowledge. When I was also growing up, it's interesting because family spoke about blood memory. So blood memory is activated, and it's quite interesting because scientists have actually proven that it exists within the cells of our DNA. My children now have been exposed since they were babies with my parents, who live on 70 acres just north of Bateman's Bay, and have lived there for, I think it's about the last 17 years now. As children, my mother would take my daughters out, and they were ongoing already, starting to learn things, gathering little sticks with mum around the tree line and things like that, and piling them up. And when the time was right, setting fire to that. So as a result, I look at that now and think, well, that's part of their blood memory that's actually being activated as well. My daughters are very comfortable. They're not frightened of fire. So even touching on that, it's big stuff, I know, for some people, and still causes, there's a lot of raw pain still down here in Bateman's Bay, where I reside today on the south coast. We're coming up to the 1-year anniversary of the bushfires. Just on some of my experiences at that time, nearly a year ago, is I actually lost touch with my parents for nearly 5 days during the bushfires, which was quite stressful. I've got a younger sister that lives in Nowra, so between the two of us, we were constantly in touch, trying to figure out what was happening, because the last communication I'd had was I was checking in every half an hour with my parents. Now, they have continued managing the land, as I mentioned, for over 17 years. Technology, of course, doesn't cover or stand up to fire in the long run. So the phone lines burnt through. And as I mentioned, for that 5 days, there was just this bit of unknown atmosphere and the stress at the time. But finally, my mother got through to me on a Wi-Fi call, and it was really amazing to hear the first-hand accounts from my parents. They do have some photos, but I think it was just a bit of a sensitive nature in terms of sharing that kind of stuff at this time. They didn't want to do that, but they do report that there was a slow trickle of fire that came in on the 70 acres of their property. I put that back to the constant years of upkeep that my parents put into it, and having my daughters out on site at various times over the years as well, burning back and doing those low intense, I suppose, burn-offs. Part of that as well, Mum and Dad actually reported that the high intense field fire that actually came in was from the surrounding tenure, which was state forest. So state forest had a number of silviculture former sites. So there was high intense fuel loads that were left around the property. And it was just interesting to get that feedback from Mum and Dad at the time that they sat back quite comfortably. And last Christmas, we actually got the residents together, some of the surrounding neighbours at my parents' property, and it was actually quite therapeutic to sit down with the neighbours, who were primarily non-Aboriginal people, of course, and then share some of the stories and experiences at that time. And one of the funniest outcomes that still sticks with me today, even though I went through the stress of worrying about my parents and whether the property was okay and whether their house was okay and that kind of stuff, one of the neighbours actually put it to me, and he said he flew around to my parents' place in a distressed state when the fire began to hit, and they were pre-warned. They had the RFS maps, and we knew where the hotspots were coming in. We had 2 days probably prior to that fire hitting when it jumped the back of the river from Nelligan and came over in behind my parents' place. The neighbour actually reported that he's come in a bit of a bad state. He hadn't done as much clearing and preparation with the lead up to that, but he reported how my parents were sitting on the veranda sipping tea, cups of tea apparently. So I just love the fact that my parents are elderly now. They'd spent all of that background and that time, obviously, over the years, maintaining that for that long-term effect, and they have all of their assets, all of their infrastructure still in place. We've been monitoring the landscape there. Unfortunately, we have noticed differences in the vegetation. We've lost a lot of the wildlife out there, but the good news is they're actually starting to come back. We've seen benefits and changes within at least the last 4 months. So that's a fantastic outcome with that in the long run. And I just thought it might be something good to mention out of that, that the land that surrounded my parents wasn't as well managed, but people can still be in this landscape at this time. And I think that I definitely credit a lot of that back to my grandparents as well. If they hadn't have given us that early fostering of fire and not being frightened of it and understanding and knowing how to use that landscape, things could have been potentially different. So I just think that was a nice little story to end off with. So thanks, guys. I'm going to hand it over to Lauren now.
Thank you. So I'm Lauren Tynan. I'm a trawlware woman from Tebequina country in northeast Tasmania, but zooming in to you today from the beautiful lands of Dharawal country and extending out Wadi Wadi and Yuin country as well. So I'm a director of an organisation called Koori Country Firesticks. I'm also doing my PhD in cultural burning and looking at relationships with country through fire, and primarily that'll be working with my ancestral community back in Tasmania and looking at cultural burning down there, but probably a little bit up in New South Wales as well. You also might see coming in and out of the frame a bit my partner Michelle, who's also involved in cultural burning, and our 3-month-old who will probably very much be involved in cultural burning too. So one of the biggest things I suppose that I've been learning over the past few years doing cultural burning is really that healing and nurturing side of fire that I certainly didn't understand or get to have when I was growing up. And it's great hearing Vicky talk about your daughters and how they're getting that. And I hope that the next generation gets to feel that side of fire too, because that's certainly been one of the biggest takeaways I've had in the past few years. But I suppose also part of the burning that I've been able to do. So Koori Country Firesticks, we do some burning around the Sydney and Hunter region, but it means that we get to do burning with lots of different country and be hosted by lots of different communities and custodians. So we've been able to learn, we all learn a lot in different ways too, but because of that learning in different ways of different communities, I wanted to share a story, particularly about, I suppose, women's roles and an experience I had with a group of women when we were doing burning. And so I'm going to share a story from a burn that we did at Yarramundi, which is Shaw's Creek Aboriginal place on Darug country in Western Sydney. And I share part of this story with the permission of the women who led the burn there. So Karina Norman Dad and Erin Wilkins, who are Aboriginal women doing their part in leading the fire in their community there. So I'm going to put some photos on while I just share this little bit of a story. I'll just set it up for you. So it's a beautiful day for burning country, and country's happy to host us all for the weekend. Darug custodians smoking us in, singing us into country and embracing us in the circle. Strong women here, women who know this country, know the fire and know their fire, and we have our own burning area, just us women. Tents near our burning area, babies run around, kids painting pots, and the most delicious food is being prepared for us all. This is a national park area, so staff are assigned to each group as an extra layer of assistance on the small containment lines. We have 2 wonderful national park women within our group. We're all set to burn. We continue the protocols of good fire. I prepare the fire stick gifted to me in Hobart by Rob Anders, a fellow trawlway man. It is the same type used by our ancestors, now travelling to New South Wales to use in our burning. I get it going and hand it to the women to start the burn. We carry ceremony with us in the everyday, in the micro practices, and fire is no exception. And this is why we don't always need the backup of water tankers and firefighters, because when the fire is lit in the right way with the permission and blessings of country, then we get the right fire for country. Each of the local women light the first 5 spots, beautiful single ignition points that radiate out in small circles, forming the most gorgeous patterns. The fire is going well. The first part did burn hot with the African love grass, pushing up against the containment line. But despite the heat and high flame height associated with these invasive grasses, there was no need to start up the hoses. The fire settled down and burnt right to the edges because we're all doing it together. And the area was cleared, calming down on its own. But it's never really on its own, whether you see it or not. We move toward the back of our burn area and start putting fire to the ground again. But the fire stick isn't giving much fire. The women are having trouble transferring the fire to the ground. We give oxygen and breathe from our bodies in the hope that the fire will take to these grasses. After trying in a few spots, the women conclude that this patch just doesn't want to light, and we really respect that. But then we notice something else. We notice 5 national parks and RFS men are standing on the rock platform, legs spread, arms crossed, bodies oriented towards us, watching the burn. It's concluded that our fires won't light because of the energy they're sending our way, whether they know it or not. See, they shouldn't be here. This is the women's area. Our own men aren't to be seen, knowing their place is away from the women's area and respecting that. A few of the local women walk up and shoo the men off the rock platform, where the ceremony leaves are still smouldering away. The men take 3 steps back, still in our area, but off the platform. They haven't really got the message. The women form a circle as a barrier, our bodies placed between the fire and the men. Slowly, the men start to drift off, turning away from us. Then our fires ignite and our burn continues, in our way, in our space. Because sometimes our fires don't burn for male observation or any observation. They're family fires, fires for our babies, fires for our old people, and fires for our healing. And in this way, the future of our fire does burn strong. So there were some images as well of the fire stick we had and the fires we had going. And it was an absolutely beautiful burn. It was a beautiful experience. I know other people got to be part of it. It was a big weekend, but it was definitely a story that sat with me and sat with the women that were involved in it. And that's why I wanted to share it today with their permission when talking about the women's role and how we go about our fire practices as well, and how all of us have different roles to play. So I'm going to leave it there. There's so much more I'd be happy to talk about. And if there are any questions that come my way, I'm happy to talk then. But for now, I want to hand it over to Auntie Daniela and keep hearing these amazing stories.
Hi. I hope everybody can see me. I don't have no idea. So, Yama, my name is Daniela. I'll go through my names. So I was born a King. I was adopted as a Phillips. My first marriage, I was a Wegner. And my last and complete and total love of my life, I'm now a Chedzi. I'm a Nyampa Wanobon woman from out Cobar areas. I am a member of the Stolen Generation. So I suppose when I talk about me and my story, I have to start from there. I was born in at Redfern, adopted by a beautiful couple. There was 21 years difference in age between those two. And so I got the old with the oncoming. Dad was born in 1897 and he grew up and was born in Maryborough in Queensland. And he grew up with the old ways and the old people. So us girls learnt how to throw knives. We were taught as boys. We had no idea how to be girls, really. Throwing knives, burning, watching the old people going up and down the coast from New South Wales up to far north Queensland, watching, learning, sitting with the old girls while mum and dad were doing business, whatever that was, and the old girls would nick off with us, two little girls, and we'd get to watch and play with them. My experiences as far as firesticks and watching the cultural burns gravitate from a lot of old stuff that was definitely activated when I was a young girl. You both talked about blood memories and DNA memories. We have such an active and justifiable blood memory around fire, but not just fire, especially around the arts. So when it comes to our songs or our words, we tend to be able to understand language without being able to speak it, which is really quite crazy at times. My youngest boy, he had his own language right up until he was about 8 or 9, and be blowed if I could understand him, but his sister could understand him. And when we started to look at Nyampa and discover the changes from words, because all language changes and progresses. Sometimes your language goes from being part of your local dialect as well as part of the junior dialect, as part of the baby dialect, and there was many different dialects within one area. And what we noticed was a lot of his words that he was coming out with pertained to our language. When it came to the boys growing up, they grew up very fast. I have 5 boys. And Jessica, my daughter. Jessica was down in Kosciuszko, Jindabyne, and spent a lot of time down there with Rod Mason, who is a UN man. And so my boys got to spend a lot of time with Uncle Rod as well. And this was many years ago, because Jessica was 20, maybe younger, when she was down at Kosciuszko. And that was probably the first lot of real hard yakka that we were actually looking at as far as cultural burns went. Uncle Rod and the head of National Parks, sorry, we have dogs in the area. Oh my goodness. Not good, but it's the only place that I can sit. We'll just have to wait for a second. Bless it. So, yeah, other dogs going past, encouraging other dogs to bark. Oh, hello. When I really think about how things were managed at Kosciuszko, I don't know if you're going to hear me over these dogs. You can? Yeah? Okay. So Kosciuszko was probably the first premise of a lot of things getting started. Uncle Rod had actually helped put together a massive amount of information about cultural burns, and this was well and truly 20 years ago and more, and had presented it to Parliament. The things that we actually have to realise is that Parliament doesn't really give a crap about our past and our connection to land and country. Back then, there was no such thing as climate change. And it's not so much, I don't like the words climate change. I think it's bad land management, in all true honesty. We tend to obtain words that aren't ours, and we tend to look at our land at times through other people's eyes. We forget to come back to the ground and just sit and realise that it is not climate change, it's poor land management. Now, looking back through all of those wonderful explorers and their journals and talking about the wonderful cake that they ate and how soft it was and how delicious it was. In all honesty, they're a bunch of morons. Sorry, I'm just me. Because what they didn't do was to actually pay attention to the flour that was actually making these beautiful cake, and to actually realize that they could probably be a lot healthier and have a lot more food in their pantry, if you like, if they actually had been not so high and mighty and just thinking that because our housing was actually done to the climate, and our dress was to our climate. It wasn't necessarily something that, you know, made us embarrassed. It wasn't our embarrassment at all. It was their ignorance. We have to look at all of those things with the fire. We had management that was micro. So when you were talking about how every single part of our areas were paid attention to, right down to the minute breakage down of fungi, and how that actually worked with fire, how the animals were able to pick up what they needed to and then move to the next set of generation of their birds as well. All of this became well and truly part of our DNA and our history. I'm going to jump from there into a story about the first burn that was done up at Newcastle. Jessica was working at Birrabban Land Council at the time when I was asked to come down, and Victor was there. And it wasn't, I'd been on that land since I was a little girl, and there used to be an old track that we used to have to go out to the point at Yarrawonga Park, and it was all dirt when we were kids, and all the housing was just the typical early style fibro houses for the fishermen. We went down there and we used to do it all the time. Mum and Dad used to drive us down there for a picnic, and we'd be down there near the boys' home. And we always used to see this one pair of emu. And the beauty of that emu was the fact that they were the only emus that I'd ever seen in that area. And the next time that we came up, there was only one. And I was absolutely heartbroken to see that there was only one emu. And they said, oh yeah, got hit by a truck, you know. And so me again, dickhead who was drunk probably drove straight down the road, barreling along, and just smacked my emu out. And that was the end of the female emu. The male emu killed itself and did the same thing. The loneliness that that emu must have felt to be able to not have anybody answer his call. Much like a lot of the time we hear that a lot of our animals are monogamous and don't have any other partner until their partner is passed. With these burns, it brought back a lot of memories. The fact that there used to be wombats in that area too, and unfortunately with the growth of population and building, they were hunted out. Morrisette Mental Hospital is one area that we have a lot of land around. We've now closed it off to public because we have juvenile delinquents, in all honesty, who go down and shoot the kangaroos or run them over with their cars for joy, which is a real sad employment. But we're also looking at rebirthing all of these things through fire. So the more that we are actually walking the country, which happens to be my husband's country, by the way, I forgot to tell you that. Rebirthing that country is by putting fire on land. Watching the RFS watch us was hilarious. That to me just cracked me up. They didn't really understand what the difference was between a slow, low heat, intense fire was compared to a drip line until we literally showed them the difference. So I was there and I lit it with a lighter. Okay, so there was this one tiny little patch and I knew it was going to peter out very nicely. And the other fella next to me, I said, okay, you drip next to me and we'll see who finishes first. And he looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, I want to see whose fire stops first, because that to me will indicate the fierceness of the fire and the intensity. And he's gone, okay, ready, set, go. And so I lit the fire with my lighter and he dripped it. And of course, when you get a drip running, what happens? You don't just get one drop, you end up with a smashing lot. And of course, mine stopped within, I think it was about a metre. And I knew it would only take about a metre because I realised that the sand area was actually there as a deterrent as well. His went for up to 5 metres and it started to run out of control. And I said to him, how are you feeling about your fire? And he said, fine, there's nothing wrong with my fire. And I said to him, I could roast a chook on the fire that you have. If I put a piece of raw meat over the top of that fire of yours, it would cook. I said, mine, did you notice all the creatures that were actually moving away? All the ants got to go, all the spiders got to go, the crickets got to go. It was scary as all Haiti because you see all these spiders flying out, you know, and you think to yourself, well, at least they're escaping. The fact is, with our fire, we can still repopulate that same area later that day. It's not hot, it's gentle. Our LORE, our law, especially pertaining to women and children, is soft. It is gentle. It is all-encumbering. You cannot have a fire that women put down on our ground without the softness and without the gentle side of us being applied to that land. Many times we see how rushed the RFS is. Bless you. We look at what happens later and we still see all of this hot smolder 2, 3, 5 days later without burns, especially done by women. And it sounds funny because when men do their soft burn, it is also soft. But I'm speaking for me and for women on how gentle our way of doing things is. And I think Lauren actually showed such awesomeness in saying, you know, it was gentle, it was pure. It was something that she knew within her core. And Vanessa said the same thing. It's something that us women have always had in our core. Part of our LORE is to care for country. Caring for country doesn't just mean chucking a few seeds here and there and walking away and throwing some water over it. What it means is to actually nurture the child within us, as well as the children that we bring into this world. We do it together through fire, through water, through air, all the elements that are what we are made of. The minerals that are made within the areas, the charcoal that is needed for the water to have that filter. All of those things come together within women's fire and men's fire. but we are specifically talking about women because we are the ones who are taking babies and little children to actually walk the land while fire is put on them. It is something that has happened for 76 or more thousand of years. Why would we stop something that works? The recognition that we have and the beginning of walking together this land holistically next to our next door neighbour who may not be from this country, but they may also be a woman who is interested in what we do with our children and can see and can understand that they are living on this country. Therefore, the respect has to be given. Last thing, I know Dean's looking at me. No, you're not. I really, really want to be able to say to every single one of you, don't ever miss a chance to go and walk country. Make sure that when you walk into country, when I come into Darwin, I always ring up the Lorikeer mob and they always go, what are you doing? Because nobody else does it. I ring them up and I say, hi, I'm here, I'm on country. My name's Daniela. I'm from New South Wales, I'm Nyampa Wanabon, and I just want you guys to know that I'm here on country. Those tiny little words to a land council can ensure the happiness and safety of your mob while you're there. Those are the connection to countries that then open up different areas. I have been so blessed in the last 20 years coming up and down to Darwin has been an experience and a half. I love New South Wales because our law is something that's imprinted in my DNA and is part of my DNA. But the sad part is that when we walk country that is not ours, we have been looking for a similar mirror system, not always there. So I want everybody to understand that we walk, we talk, we eat, we live, we drink, we die on our country. We have been doing this for 76 or more thousand years. Every day is a gift. Live it to the fullest. Don't ever doubt yourselves because your DNA runs deep within you. It comes out even in your dreams. And your children's eyes are not just their eyes, they are the children of the past, the present and the future. Always walk with your head held high, the whole stinking lot of yous. Because without you guys walking forward and without that pride that you need to survive the rest of the time, we could lose so many beautiful assets. And you guys are absolutely awesome. Be proud of yourselves, each and every one of you. Don't doubt that you guys have a special place in that. You have elders that are watching you from your past, because without them, we wouldn't be here either. Each time that we go through another part of our journey, always ensure that you put something down on paper so that your grandchildren can actually read it, because they're the true meanings of history. The history that is written within those stupid books that so many people like to throw down our throats when we're at school is not the true history. The true history is written on every single one of your faces and in your hearts, because they're the hearts and the faces of the people who came before you. So I'm going to stop there, and I love yous all, and I'm passing over to the next person. Bye.
Thanks, Auntie. That was very, very beautiful. Can everyone hear me okay? So my name is Emily. I'm a Budawang person from the Yuin Nation. I grew up in Bermagui on Jirinjanj country. I don't know if you can see it, but that's a picture of Gulaga there on the wall. So I'm at the ANU. I'm just about to finish my undergraduate degree and starting an honours next year. So my honours is going to be essentially like an embodied UN methodology. So I'm going to be living with my uncle Noel Butler on his property, Jamani Gunyu, which was decimated in the 2019-2020 fires. And so, yeah, there's a lot to it. I guess I kind of wanted the main, I guess, premise of the work is it's sort of mapping the emotional landscape of the grief of the fires and this process of relearning and rebecoming with country that's really sick. And I guess locating those emotions within ourselves as a way to be strong for country and sort of grappling with that. So I think a big part of my work, it's going to sit within the Fenner School, which is the environmental science school. But a really big part of my work, which we're sort of pushing for, is to be a lot of the evidence to be narrative and sound work. So I'm a musician and I've been composing music out of field recordings from the site. So it's as a way to essentially track how Budjan are coming back and the animals that are coming back and just the movements of country, so the way that the weather patterns are changing as well. And so, yeah, I think a big part of this work is to sort of reclaim the way that we tell our stories. So creating not just a more accessible way of communicating, but something that evokes something in us that goes beyond academic journal articles and this sort of 15 pages of repeating yourself over and over and over again, and potentially talking in a way that's more for, you know, the academy than it is for mob. And so I think that it's going to be challenging, I think, to actually get the school to recognize the sound work as evidence, but it's something that we're really pushing for. And I think that's a big part of, I think, that all of the work that you, like all of you women do, is it's as much a fight as it is doing the actual work. And so I think that I am following in the footsteps of all the women who have come before us, you know, beyond, within and beyond the academy. And I feel really grateful for that. Yeah, there's a lot to it. But I do have a sound work that I would like to share with the group. I don't know if I've explained myself well enough, but it's very much a work in progress. So I'm very much a learner. So I think that just even coming here tonight and being able to share what I have so far is a really amazing opportunity. So thank you, everyone. And I'm going to mute myself now so I don't get the feedback, but I'll share my screen and hopefully it'll work. Thanks. Yeah, I guess for me as well, the role of music and sound has always been the way that I understand the world, and I think that for everyone, but specifically for Mob, I think sound is one of the greatest gifts that country gives us, and I think that it's a really big part of how we pass on our knowledge and how we reclaim that and use that, I guess, to our advantage, and especially in the way that we're communicating our academic work. So it's something that I'd really like to, keep using. And that that Padlet thing is, it's something that I continue to update. So maybe I can post that to Dean, and it can be something that people can look at and see how it changes as well. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Emily. That was great. And that sound, it was so kind of, I don't know, there was a bit of a trance going on there. It kind of really kind of lightened the mood a little bit. It was really nice to sit there and listen to that. Thanks so much. And you've it's what's good about tonight is we've had Auntie Daniela on, who's such a force, and she's been fighting the fight for so long, and she's got so much story to tell. And then we've got young blood coming through like who's doing their going and doing their studies and being on country and trying to find that ground between Western and Mob, and trying to find out where that fits in. So thanks so much for sharing. You've got a really promising future ahead of you, and we're going to see some good stuff come from you for sure. Thank you so much. We've got some time for some questions. Mon, is there any questions waiting, or?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Can you hear me? I don't know what happened there. Yeah. Oh gosh, firstly, before I ask any questions, I just want to say how incredibly beautiful each one of you spoke, and how each one of you had a different story that thread together like a beautiful tapestry in the end, and finishing off there with Emily's beautiful music and your story, and that storytelling through that the way you're trying to express that, Emily, is so beautiful. And I actually think it would be really nice I personally would just love to I like to meditate a lot. I would love to just have that music, because that's part of like what Auntie Daniela was saying, that sometimes, unfortunately, I can't always be out on country. I'm I'm a non-indigenous woman, but I still feel very that deep connection and that need to be on country. And when I can't, I really feel lost. So to have something like the stories you're telling through the music that you've just presented to all of us, like for me to have that to listen to without even understanding the background fully of that, you can definitely feel it. So it was really beautiful. Thank you to everyone, and thank you, Auntie, for your beautiful wisdom to everyone as well, especially the women on this panel. How encouraging is that to hear that from such an amazing elder? So thank you, all of you. Your stories were beautiful. But anyway, I will stop talking and I'll go on to the questions. There were some questions and there's lots of comments coming through. Emily, I love it. Such a wonderful layering of sound, so important to feel. And another lady, Hannah, has said, thank you so much, everyone. My 9-year-old is watching with me and is so happy to learn from you all. That's just so precious. Great work, Emily. Love the mix with the sound of nature and electronics. Would love to see how this project grows. I think we all feel the same. And yeah, beautiful. All feeling very blessed to be exposed to such beautiful energy, women, and creativity. And I think we can all agree with that. There's so many comments in here. I can't even, they're just coming through thick and fast. There were some questions though that Dean had emailed to him, and he sent them to me. I'm going to ask them now. I just want to apologise in advance if I don't get the pronunciation of some of the language in here correct, because some of the words I may say wrong. So please forgive me if that happens. But one of the questions is, I'm interested to hear about the use of fire to assist in regeneration of cleared farming lands, restoring tree cover and ecosystems along the Castlereagh and other rivers in particular. How do we use fire with young trees, native and exotic? So I don't know if any of you ladies would like to answer that question, or whether you'd like to send the answer. We can find the answer elsewhere otherwise, or yeah, I'll just open that up. Yeah, we might actually get back to that question, because that was emailed to us, so that could be something from the previous weeks. Yes. There's some other questions in there. How can I assist and participate in cultural burning and training up here? We're not really sure where that, I'm not really sure. I think it says this man, we might get back to this man in an email actually, Bruce. But in relation to tonight, we really don't have many questions. We've got lots and lots of comments. I'm so moved and inspired by all of you incredible women. What can we do to spread more soft fire and get more women burning? Vanessa, thank you.
Thank you for all the lovely speakers, and thank you for organising those questions, Monica. You know, one of the things that I've learned to do through my research and just through the upbringing that I've had is making sure that I'm advocating for Aboriginal women to be present at the table where decision making is happening. So if you're working in NRM, or if you're involved in any of these type of programs, and you look around and you see that there aren't women engaged, aren't Aboriginal women there at the table, then I encourage you to take a step back and say, okay, is this appropriate? Do we need to make space for Aboriginal women's voices to be heard in these forums? So that's something that I do. And just another little thing that I noticed, there is a question in the Q&A down the bottom for Lauren. So Lauren can jump in and have a look at that one. But just in terms of that question about the regeneration along the Castlereagh River, you know, one of the things that I've heard from all the people that I've been engaged with in cultural burning is that making sure that you're learning from local, you know, engaging with local Aboriginal people, following those local protocols, and yeah, making sure you're getting that guidance from local Aboriginal elders. So it's really important that they do those things locally. I'll hand over to someone else.
I can answer that question that was in the Q&A. So I quickly got my partner to bring over the firesticks because I saw that. So this is the one that we used and was in the photos that we used out on Darug country. Still smells absolutely divine. And I've got then real deal full one that you didn't even see in the photos, which is about that big. It still has everything inside it. So these were made by Rob Anders, who's a Trawlway man from down in Tasmania that I brought back up with me. I'm not going to speak for what they're made and the materials, because that's Rob's to share, but I will quickly screen share a photo, because what's really special about that Rob and the community making these fire sticks again is that they are the fire sticks used by our ancestors. So I'll quickly show you a photo. This is our old ancestral grandfather Manalagena, who was around right at the time of colonisation in Tasmania, and led a guerrilla warfare against the colonists in Tasmania. And you can see this beautiful image, sorry, not a photo, this beautiful image where he's holding the fire stick. It's more of a fire carrier to carry fire across country rather than a fire stick. But it just shows the resurgence of fire knowledges and law that's happening all over the country, but in this context with my own community down in Tasmania. So yeah, they're very beautiful and special things to have and use, not just artifacts and objects to sit on a shelf, to use and carry through country and use in a contemporary way, which is very important to carry those traditions on.
would be beautiful to see a beautiful painting of some Indigenous women with fire sticks like that. That would be just magnificent. I think there was, just still, still lots of comments coming through along the same lines, but I'll go back because there's not many questions. Oh, hang on. I've got a comment here from Toby, which is really beautiful. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. What an absolute privilege it is to hear your stories, your wisdom, your journeys. Thank you, Auntie Daniela, for sharing such beautiful, inspiring and encouraging words. And thank you, Emily, for sharing such beautiful, soulful and powerful music. Sending love, respect and good energy to you all. So I just thought I'd read that one because it's really sweet. I kept taking notes while you were all talking and I'm trying to go back to them because they're all like, there's so many questions for all of you. Vanessa, where can we get some information on the studies that you've been doing if people wanted to find out more?
I have, I think most recently my contributions have been through the Royal Commission into the National Natural Disasters. So I put a submission into that so people can go back and watch that. The hearings for that are online. But I've also participated in a number of podcasts. There was one that was launched earlier this week or last week, and that was with a group called For the Wild. So myself and some other Aboriginal women participated in that podcast. The deadly Rachel Kavanagh, who is a Bundjalung woman and works in State Forest, she participated in that podcast along with Deb Swan. So it's a good way to learn from other Aboriginal women and listen to those stories. Another podcast I've done is with Amy Christensen, who's a Métis woman from First Nations from Canada, and we did a podcast where we were talking about women's knowledge and fire across the different hemispheres. So I think if you just, I don't know if you follow me on Twitter maybe, or if you Google search Vanessa Kavanagh and podcasts, links to those podcasts can come up. And I just love podcasts because you get to hear the people, you know, but you don't have to sit and watch the screen. You can listen to the voices. So yeah.
Somebody's already put the link in the comments, but yeah, even if you have any links you want to send to us, Vanessa, we can add them to the text on the webcast for when people...
Yeah. And so my publications list is also on my University of Wollongong scholars page as well. So people could just Google search Vanessa Kavanagh and UOW scholars, and that's my publication list.
Great.
That feels very academic.
That's so good, thank you. I have Joe Ray asked a question. When country is a city, how can we custodians be heard across the bureaucracies in Darragan? I'm going to get this wrong, I know, and I feel really bad, but I'm
help you out there, Mon. It's Darragnura.
Darragnura.
Yep.
I didn't want to say it wrong and disrespect anyone, which eventually is Sydney. So yeah, so I guess people are asking, you know, even though they're in the city, how can they be heard? Auntie?
I think the way that we need to actually walk forward with this, especially for our mobs, is together with people from our local land councils. A lot of the time we think that we're not going to be able to get an answer from them, but I think the more times that people walk into a land council and say, hi, this is me, I'd like, and I'm interested in learning about fire sticks and how it works. How do I get involved? Is there a program that is running within the local area? Do you know of another Aboriginal land council that is actually running things? Or jump online and Google Koori Firesticks or Firestick Alliance or those sort of places, you can see that there are actually places that we can actually go and join together and learn how to do all of these things. It's an important step forward, if you like, in the evolution of getting care and control back on country, that we need to be able to encourage, and please, I'm not political, so I'm just going to say it my way, mainstream. It's a nice way of saying everyone else who is interested in doing this to actually have a look and go into the local land councils and say to them, I understand that there may be something that is coming up soon that we could have people attend. Is there anything coming up? It's important, and I keep pushing it back onto land councils as well, because I think if we don't start communicating with our local land councils as well as other organisations who are doing this, we're doing ourselves a disservice. But yeah, walk into those places, hold yourselves properly and ask the questions that you need answered. If you don't get any satisfaction, by all means, then start looking at, living knowledge and everyone else that's out there. That's just my idea.
Yeah, thank you, Auntie. I think it's good to have as a point of reference that, is accessible by everyone, because having that Lands Council connection in many places, we can all do that. So, yeah. Another question by Josh Gowers. Hey guys, thank you so much for sharing knowledge and caring for people and country. You guys are awesome. I'd just like to ask about how you guys see your kids and young people engaging with cultural fire and the places and ecosystems they're in and with. I'm aware of the challenges of young people growing up with powerful systems of technology, social media, etc. Do you see these relationships you're sharing with your kids as grounding them beyond a future of images and digital marketing? Vicky.
Yeah, I'm happy just to make a couple of personal comments there from my experiences. I know my daughters roll their eyes when I talk about this kind of stuff because they cop it all the time. They've actually been subjected to this stuff from the womb, basically, in former works and jobs that I used to do. So I do find that it's my obligation, and I'm very committed as a mother to taking my daughters out on country all the time. Like I said, they roll their eyes. They're sick of mum dragging them out to show them plants and things like that and visiting our old people sites, that transitional knowledge, sharing stories of country. But at the same time, I have to admit that my children are finding that in a modern Western society, as they are growing up, they do somewhat struggle at the moment because they are perceived to be a little bit different because they are cultural children. So therefore, it's quite interesting. I'm grounding them to be strong in that light, though, to maintain those connections and understanding too that not everybody has that exposure. So my daughters have their cultural goggles well and truly on. There are things that they pick up, they perceive when they go out into the landscape that other people just don't generally notice. And we talked a little bit before about that blood memory, even to the extent where I've witnessed explaining to my daughter an old technique I was shown as a child on how to catch blue swimmer crabs. And without me giving her direction, we just happened to be out with some Australian National University archaeologists at the time when my daughter decided to take off and actually went and captured one of the biggest blue swimmer crabs that we've seen in a long time. So that was the blood memory, in my view, activated well and truly while she was out on country, and her connection, her identity at the time, was only strengthened through that. So I do see that it is a juggle. I think that in a Western modern world, the kids can very well still have these connections still be shown and have and maintain that knowledge while still walking the two paths.
Yeah, that's so important. Just like as Auntie says, just walk on country, I imagine, is the essence of that. But the beauty of it, what I'm seeing tonight is in Emily's story is that beautiful melding of the two, the technology and that blood knowledge and connection to country, which is really quite amazing as well. So it is that transition into the future while still keeping that connection of the past and the stories, which is really important work that Emily is doing, I guess, in reference to that question. So another question, this is by an anonymous attendee, is how is knowledge managed or shared today differently to the past? Is there women's burning knowledge which is too sensitive to share here? And would traditional burning be something that tourists would be able to participate in the future, possibly?
Okay, there's actually two parts to that question. So I'm going to answer part of it, and then I'm going to chuck it at Vanessa. Let her answer the other part. So can you just read that first part of that question again? Because that was the part that tickled my interest.
Yeah. So how is, sorry, I'm just going to fix this. Whoops. So how is knowledge managed or shared today differently to the past? And is there women's burning knowledge which is too sensitive to share on this platform?
Okay, so to answer the last part first, yes. There is women's knowledge there that is way too sensitive to pass over this forum. Under no circumstances would any of us, and I'm going to refer to us as girls because we haven't got that part of law as well anymore. A lot of us do have law, but not to that past degree. So therefore it would be wrong for us to talk about the minute side of things, that the intricate parts of women's law that refer back to fire. With how we pass it on these days is to activate that DNA memory, as well as walking forward with the child next to us. My granddaughter, when I'll give her another year, so that'll make her 2. And I can guarantee you I will have her out on country doing burns. It's an important part to activate that memory as soon as possible with me. It's like learning how to put your hand into your ochre and do your first ceremony. Those sort of things are an integral part of who we are across the board. And women themselves know that passing down the knowledge that they got from grandparents, parents, and even great-grandparents, if they were lucky enough, there's parts of that is so special just to them that they wouldn't pass that on unless it was their daughters. So we need to be respectful of that too. And I'll pass the other side over to you, my girl.
Good one. Monica, could you just repeat the second part of that question, please?
Would traditional burning be something that tourists would be able to participate in the future, possibly?
Yeah, look, there's different cultural burning workshops that are occurring all over the country. Sorry, I have now a massive freight train rolling past my house, so I don't know whether you can hear that in the background. So, it's interesting when people want to have that sacred knowledge, and it makes me wonder, you know, why does that person want to know these things, and do they question themselves on why they want to know these things? Is it just out of interest to know that that thing exists, or are they requiring an element of evidence for things to be proven to them, and you know, some of the tricks around that stuff. But there's, you know, with the cultural burning workshops that I've attended, especially like the National Indigenous Fire Workshop, you know, they're attended by all people from all walks of life. There are babies there right up to the old elders, you know, there are men, women, children attending, Indigenous people, non-Indigenous people, people who work in agencies, people who are just, you know, found out about it, you know, that week and are just attending. So there's certainly different workshops that people are welcome to attend, but there's also some things that are just for community, you know, and we're also responding in a frame of our reaction to 230 years of oppression and the colonial project, and that we're wanting to educate and share that knowledge specifically with our young people first, so that they can carry these things forward and have their own strong identities. And so, you know, there may be cases where, you know, communities are very restrictive or very selective about who they allow into their cultural burns, but rightly so. You know, we're not in, and, you know, you've got the knowledge economy as well. You know, having knowledge is like the new economy. So it's really important that those stories stay strong within our communities. And so there are some places where, you know, opportunities are shared, and there are other places where it is not shared. But if you're interested in participating in cultural burning workshops, there are certainly opportunities for non-Indigenous people or, you know, non-local people to participate. And you can look up, you know, Firesticks Alliance, or like Lauren mentioned, the Koori Country Firesticks Association. Some of those burns are advertised, and the invite goes out for people to participate, and they're quite often capped and managed in a really, you know, a really kind of delicate way, but that makes it a meaningful experience for the people that participate as well. So I hope that answers the question. Go, Vic.
Just while we're in this space, I thought it might be really good just to touch on that and add to Vanessa and Arndt's point there as well. We do have terminology around the management of that material now. So anyone that's watching can actually look up the Indigenous cultural and intellectual procurement protocols that have been taking place. And cultural appropriation is a really big factoring key thing now, which with different agencies and research as well. So that is the appropriate, sensitive management of our knowledge and material. So I think that's just one just to add to that.
Thanks, Vicky. I think that actually answers one of our other questions in a way. And I'm sorry if I get your name wrong, but it's Finn or F-E-H-I-N. So I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that one either, so sorry. But he has said, thank you so much for sharing today. My mind is vibrant from your sharing. My name is Finn. I'm a non-Indigenous landscape architect who is fascinated by good land management practices. What kinds of support would you like to receive from white allies? And what are some common mistakes we make from time to time? Or actually says from time and time again. Yes, Lauren?
I think the biggest one is listening, and exactly like we've just been talking about, is giving and respecting space as well. So even when invitations are open for non-Indigenous or non-local people to attend and learn about cultural burning, it's also about listening and giving space to either the local people or Aboriginal people who are sharing knowledge, and not to assume to be an expert in something. And I think this is where there's an interesting overlap between the expertise of Western science and the expertise of Indigenous knowledges too, because I've certainly, like many people, witnessed time and time again, being at a workshop or being somewhere where Indigenous knowledge is being shared so generously, you know, refined and perfected over thousands of generations, and someone with usually Western scientific knowledge would like to assert their own expertise of a very niche area. And I think that's certainly something that we're seeing more often, is that Indigenous knowledges and Western scientists can come together, and we're working together in cultural burning to further the policy and further the opportunities for cultural burning. But I think in terms of when we're talking about allyship and learning, it's actually about giving space, stepping back, and listening, and that there'll be a time for your expertise, but sometimes it's not in those spaces.
Vanessa, yeah.
And just to add to that, allyship is important all the time. So we've seen this week, you know, those disastrous experiences of the Jabberong people down there in Victoria who've been trying to maintain and protect those old trees for, you know, however many years they've been trying to ask the roads department there to change the direction of that road and then have that tree cut down yesterday. You know, there are times there where people are being asked to come in and prove or support through their allyship, you know, to protect those places that Aboriginal people are saying time and time again, this place is important to us. Turn up at those times, turn up to the Black Lives Matter rallies, you know, turn up when things are shit for Aboriginal people, as well as when we're having a lovely, you know, caring for country moment.
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa. That's so important, isn't it? It's, yeah, very easy to want to do the nice things, but yeah, very confronting when those challenges come up for you guys time and time and time again. So always good to have that support. We have one more question here from Eugene. Thank you all so much for sharing your knowledge and experiences. Feeling incredibly blessed to be part of this. The RFS has been mentioned a few times as strong examples of how burning can be practiced badly. How do you think we can encourage agencies like this and similar to learn from proper cultural burning practices? This is a question that comes up just about every week since we've had the seminars, really. And yeah, it'd be interesting to have a woman's, answer to that. Lauren?
Yeah, look, on a very similar note to, I suppose, the last response, I've had the most wonderful experience with RFS who are just there to listen and learn and have told us, oh my God, I want to swap my RFS jacket for a firesticks jacket and you know, be part of what you're doing, because for them it's so healing and so beautiful to be with that type of fire. But on the other hand, I've also had similar experiences with RFS where again, it's an overstepping of the mark. So it's an asserting of a particular type of expertise without listening to Aboriginal knowledge holders. And I'm talking, I suppose, now on the individual level of those people who I've been with at Burns. But I think that is reflective of an organisational structure, one that's hierarchical and one that is necessary at the moment and doing the most amazing work, but also there needs to be some organisational change and shift in understanding, I suppose, fire and respecting different ways of fire. So I can only speak for some of that level that we see with people, but I can't speak necessarily for an agency change. And I think for me, it's always the issue we always come about is it bottom-up change or top-down? I think we need to be doing it all. So certainly working with the individual RFS members in local communities is just the most rewarding and beautiful thing often, but how do we actually change things at the top? I've also seen that the National Indigenous Fire Workshops, people from RFS, CFA and other fire agencies and governmental agencies come on board and have a truly transformative experience, because it's not about sitting in a meeting room or a webinar like we're doing today, which is great and one step, but being with the fire and individuals and communities changing their relationship with fire on a spiritual level can have transformative change. And I suppose that's my big hope, is that can ripple out to an agency level.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lauren. That's definitely been a common response, to that question over the past few weeks. So lovely to hear it from you as well. And I did notice, I did really like seeing that on your cultural burns you have Indigenous women working for and with the National Parks and Wildlife Services who were, you know, embracing the teachings that you were offering. So that's really lovely to see. That's a nice change. So yeah, I think we're going to be hearing more about interagencies and other agencies' involvement in the coming weeks. So that will be really good to hear and hopefully answer a lot of people's questions. So yeah. And I think we've answered all the questions tonight, and I could stay here all night and keep talking to you and asking you. I've got a million questions written in my book here, but I don't want to keep you all any longer because I know you all have little babies and families and awaiting grandchildren, auntie to get to. But I'll let Leanne speak to wrap it up. But before I do that, I just want to say thank you for coming on our Treading Lightly webcast and giving us this opportunity to share from a non-Indigenous perspective to all of our members and followers, and hopefully just to spread the seed of Firestick further and further and further. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Mon. You said that really well. Thanks to our panelists tonight, Vicky, Vanessa, Lauren, Auntie, and young Em. I can't see your face on this top, but I know you're still there. Such a great conversation tonight. And yes, Monica, next week the topic is working with agency and science. So maybe some more of those questions and answers will come out then. So definitely jump on and get your ticket for next week. We've had a great response to the shirts again this week. So if you haven't grabbed your shirt yet, please grab one. And the money, all proceeds go to the Firesticks, and it's such a easy and simple way to be able to promote cultural burning by wearing a shirt with something that might inspire thought with someone that walks past you in the shop, or they might go, oh, what does that mean? So yeah, it's not even just about the money, sometimes it's about the message. So please get on there and support if you can. Yeah, so thanks again, ladies. Such a great night. Sorry we went over. It happens every week. We work on it. It still happens. It's just an important conversation. So thanks to everyone for tuning in. I can see the same people popping in each week, as well as new names. So thanks so much, guys. Spread the word if you're enjoying the webinars. We've still got another 3 weeks to go. So more conversation to come. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Dean, for holding space for all the women. You've done a really good job there.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you, guys.
And I know
Thank you so much.
I know Uncle Nook's there in the background. And I did see in the chat his word for the week, which I'm going to go back and try and find.
Inspirational, I think it was.
Empowering. So Uncle had a word for the week every week, and this week it's empowering, and he's pretty spot on the money there. Thanks, Nook. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night. Thank you.
Go on to www.treadinglightly.org.au for all the previous recordings.
Okay, you're a